I'm very thrilled to introduce our next speaker, who is a former news anchor turned positive psychologist. Gielan built a very distinguished career as an anchor at CBS, and after a long time in the news world, she moved into positive psychology, and to that end, she has a master's in applied positive psychology from University of Pennsylvania, where she studied under Martin Seligman, one of the founders of the positive psychology movement. Her work is featured in all kinds of news media outlets, New York Times, Harvard Business Review, CNN, all over, and she is the author of the book, Broadcasting Happiness. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Gielan.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm just so thrilled to be here with all of you. I am so grateful to get the chance to talk to you about broadcasting happiness and share some of the research that we've been doing and some of the other folks in the field as well, and then how to use it, whether it's in your own life, in building happier relationships with the people around you, in your practice. I want to arm you with all that information so it's easy to better communicate with the people around you to convince them that happiness is worthwhile in investing in. So, thank you for the warm introduction. You heard two words you do not often hear in the same sentence: news and happiness, right? As a matter of fact, I was recently in New York for a talk, and I get to LaGuardia, I jump in the back of the cab. I love everything about New York. I love the yellow cabs, the tall buildings, the energy of the city, and so I cannot wait to hear what's going on in the city. And in the back of the cab, there was one of those little television screens with the news, right? So this is what I hear. Topping today's news, 4 people were stabbed on the subway. There's been an outbreak of disease-carrying rats in lower Manhattan, and rents are on the rise again across the city. So by the time I get to my talk in Midtown, I'm thinking, am I going to get mugged on the subway by a rat with Ebola who can't even afford an apartment? What is going on here? But it's not just New York, right? I mean, how many of you have slowed down watching your local news? Show of hands. Okay, great. So I think what you're intuiting is that negative messages can have a negative effect on our health and our happiness, right? Well, you're right. In a study that we recently did, I did this with Sean Acor, who I think you've all figured out at this point, we're married, and he's awesome. Yeah. And Arianna Huffington. Oh, by the way, he's that funny at home, which is true. It's amazing. So we teamed up with Arianna Huffington, and what we wanted to understand was how news influences our brain. And we found that just 3 minutes of negative news in the morning actually leads to a 27% higher likelihood of you reporting a bad day, as reported 6 to 8 hours later. So what's significant about that is that your mood and your mindset can be impacted by just those 3 minutes. Instead of taking a vitamin, we're filling our head with negativity, we're carrying it through the course of our day, we're even feeling the effects at dinner time. So I was at CBS, I had this amazing opportunity, anchor 2 national newscasts, but I got tired of telling negative news stories, and more importantly, what I wanted to understand from a research perspective is how can we talk about the negative, not just on TV, not just in the news, but in our own lives as well, in a way that leaves us feeling empowered and ready to take positive action. And so I left and went to get a master's in positive psychology. But the thing is, though, while at Penn, I had this epiphany. And it was about you, about all of us, which is, and I want you to think about this. We're all broadcasters. As we move throughout the course of our day, we're always constantly transmitting information to the people around us. And the information we choose to transmit, to broadcast, either creates success or it holds us back. But what's remarkable is how quickly that can happen. We are incredibly influential on other people, on the people around us, and it happens in mere seconds. There's this amazing study done at the University of California, Riverside, where researchers took 3 people, groups of 3s, right, put them in a room to sit around a table in silence for just 2 minutes. Little awkward, right? And then, before and after this experience, they tested their mood. And what they found was that the person who was most non-verbally expressive actually significantly influenced the mood of the other two people in the room. Okay, so if that person, the most nonverbally expressive, was sitting there with their arms crossed, a scowl on their face, they actually made the other two people feel more negative. Now, meanwhile, if the person was relaxed and smiling and happier, they actually made those other two people in the room happier as well. And that's in just 2 minutes. Can you imagine the influence that we have when we continually broadcast a specific type of message to people in our lives, how we can transform their brain and how we can ultimately transform the trajectory of their lives? Sean and I had the pleasure of working with this guy. We call him the $100 million man. And the reason is that he sold his company for $100 million. And you'd think that that night he'd go home, pop some, I don't know, Dom Perignon or whatever the most expensive champagne is. I don't know. Yeah. And then he would have a party and he'd be the happiest guy, right? Well, it turned out that at 2 a.m, he actually ended up having a nervous breakdown. And the reason was because he didn't really have a strong relationship with his wife. He was convinced that she was going to divorce him. He didn't have a strong relationship with his kids because he'd invested so much time in the business that he built up. He ate too many of his own sandwiches. It was a fast food business, so he was very overweight and out of shape. And just overall, his life was not really working well, except for that one domain of work, which he now didn't have anymore because he sold it. So at 2 a.m, his wife said to him, "Honey, I'm not going to divorce you, at least not tonight. What I am going to do is get your shoes on, we're going out for a walk." And so she took him out for a walk, and she said, "All I want to do on this walk is talk about what we're grateful for." He said it was actually harder to go on that walk, or actually harder to talk about what he was grateful for than it was to go on that walk. And he said because he was really out of shape, it was actually really difficult. And so he said, well, we talked about a handful of things that I could come up with, and I felt a little better. And so the next night when she offered, "Do you want to go on another walk?" he said, "Okay, yeah, sure, I'll go." They kept that practice up for 2 weeks, and at the end of the 2 weeks, he felt so much better. And so he said, "I've got an idea. Let's bring this to the dinner table and force our daughters to do this with us." Yeah, so you guys can all figure out how that went over, right? The 5-year-old thought it was cute, the 13-year-old rolled her eyes, and they really weren't into actually participating. So the parents said, "You know what, okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and do it. We're gonna start our dinners with gratitudes, and if you guys wanna jump in, go for it. If not, just be quiet and listen." And again, another 2 weeks passed, and the kids did not really participate. Then he gets a call from another father at school, and he says, "I need to talk to you about what your teenage daughter did at the sleepover the other night." I said, "Oh no, was it boys? Was it drinking? Was it both? What's this guy gonna tell me?" And he said, "Actually, so what happened was, your daughter at the sleepover, well, she felt that a lot of the girls at school were being exceptionally mean recently, so she sat down all the girls in a circle and had them go around and say nice things about one another." I love that story because it shows us that this wife had a suggestion. Let's go on a walk and talk about what we're grateful for. The dad said, "This is working, I feel better, let's bring it to the dinner table." And then the ripple effect went to the sleepover, and who knows how far it went after that. We're changing people all the time. We have the ability. You do it every day in your work. You do it every day when you come into contact with people. What I'm most interested in is what's the material of our broadcast? What do we specifically need to talk about? What can we leverage to bring out the best in ourselves and other people, and the mechanics of it? If I make this small, positive change in my life, what's the ripple effect? What's the easiest way I can do it, and how can I take advantage of all that this research presents itself to us? So I am a happiness researcher. I didn't start out that way. I started off as a computer engineer writing code at this.com that I worked for, dreaming about being a network news anchor broadcasting from New York City. Those dreams are great. If any of you are interested in journalism, I will tell you this. You do not start your career in New York. You start anywhere they'll take you. And so I sent 150 tapes around the country. I got one call. By the way, I made the mistake one time of asking the audience, "How many calls do you think I got?" And this guy in the front row was like, "0." It's like, close. I actually did get one, which was awesome. So I went to El Paso, Texas, And yeah, and it was such a blessing. So, and I worked such an amazing schedule there that it got me to pondering deep philosophical questions. When you begin your newscast at 3 in the morning, do you begin with buenas noches or buenos dias? Yeah. So the exciting part of the story is what would normally take someone about a decade to go from small town to major market like New York. I was able actually to make that transition in 3 years. And I credit to this meteoric rise to hard-hitting investigative pieces. I know you all saw them. Bed bugs take over mattresses across Chicagoland. Skin-eating fish ladies make for a better pedicure. My personal favorite, my biting interview with the Dalai Lama. Oh no, wait, actually it was Dalai the Lama. Yeah, that actually went down at a petting zoo. So, the reason I tell you about this brief timeline is that when I got here to CBS, I was still full of hope and optimism about the good work that we could do given our reach and resources, right? Tell people stories and information that they need to make the best decisions in life. Except that my newscasts were full of stories of murder, death, destruction, natural disasters, bank failures, corruption, and then the recession hit, and it was all these emotional stories of people losing their homes and their jobs and their retirement savings. And so it was then that I started to question, is this just a problem of we're talking about too many negative stories, or is there something deeper going on here? And what I came to see is that we are telling stories in the wrong way. The reality is a barrage of negative news feeds your brain this lie that your behavior does not matter. There are many things in this world that are beyond our control, but when our brain starts to see only problem with no talk about solutions, our brain starts to believe that we cannot create positive change in the world. Yes, there are millions of things that we can't control, but the real problem is when our brain starts to believe that all things are beyond our control. And that's what I believe is happening right now on the news. We're too problem-focused, we're not talking about solutions enough, and it's having a negative effect on our health and our happiness. I started to see it while covering this story back in Chicago. The night that this happened, a stray bullet from gang gunfire blasted through the living room window of a home. Inside that home, in a neighborhood called Englewood, which is a neighborhood known for gangs, guns, and drugs, inside that home, there was a birthday party going on. The bullet hit this little girl in the head, instantly killing her, and it was actually her birthday. Yeah, she was one day shy of turning 11 years old. And so when this happened, we did the story that I had been guilty of many times before, right? Sensational story of a girl snatched before her time, heart-wrenching interview with the mother who just witnessed her daughter die, talking to these kids whose lives would never be the same. And then cut to 1 week later at the funeral, and I'm sitting in the pews of this church, and I see something that changed the trajectory of my life, and it's absolutely informed the research I now do. I saw this group of women, presumably the other mothers from the neighborhood, and they were surrounding the mother who had just lost her daughter and hugging her and swaying to songs of prayer. And it was in that moment that I saw that we have a choice about how we talk about what happened. We can focus solely on the pain and desperation, or we can talk about the hope and the optimism and the resilience of this community. We can talk about the fact that Englewood is not a desirable neighborhood. It's dangerous. You don't want to be there. Or at the same moment, we can focus how it's getting better thanks to coordinated efforts by police, leaders, and citizens. There's stats, there's information, data on this. We can talk about all of this and synthesize a completely different story. One story leaves us paralyzed, the other leaves us rallied to take action because we believe that positive change is possible. And so, back at CBS News, I thought, let's try this crazy thing called Happy Week. I love experiments. You can tell Sean and I are married for a good reason. We both love experiments. And so you might recognize a very handsome gentleman up there. This was at the height of the recession. Picture this. You're being bombarded by story after story after story about all the horrible things that are going on economically. You feel really helpless and hopeless. So what do? For every problem that we served up for a week, we talked also about solutions that you could take right now. It was awesome. And so we called it Happy Week. It was totally rooted in positive psychology. I'm so grateful to Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar because he was our first guest, and he opened my eyes to this field. And as a result of that week of programming, we got the greatest viewer response of the year. And I have to share with you this one story in particular because I just love this. So this guy writes in from Oklahoma, and he said, "My home's facing foreclosure. I heard through the town grapevine that my brother's home is facing foreclosure as well." So these two guys get in a fight about 2 decades prior over money. They don't speak anymore, right? But they live just 20 miles away from each other, so they hear about each other's lives all the time, right? So he said, one night I'm flipping through the channels, and I see this interview about rethinking financial challenges, and it sparked an idea. You know what he ended up doing? He reached out to his brother, they pooled their resources, saved one of the homes, and moved in together. Great, right? Smallest mindset shift, positive action, new reality. We can do this all the time. We can provide people with information. We can have the right discussions. We personally can respond to problems in a new and different way, in a way that helps us rebound more quickly. It's not about never having problems in life. It's about how we respond to them. And so I'm obsessed with the science of that, and I wanted to share with you the work that we've done now at our institute that's looking at the 3 greatest predictors of long-term levels of success. So we predominantly do this in the work domain, but this is really applicable to any domain of life, and as I think you'll see. So the first one is optimism. It's the belief that your behavior matters and the expectation of good things to happen. So when we, for instance, were to lose a job, we work with people who were recently unemployed and looking for their next opportunity. The person who is very optimistic will say, okay, well, I expected things to happen. I expect to find a new job, and so they'll more quickly jump on LinkedIn, update their resume, reach out to former colleagues and see what opportunities are there. The pessimist will get around to doing those kind of behaviors eventually out of necessity, but it often takes them a lot longer. And the belief that they can do something, rather quickly, it's not as strong. And you see it in the results. This second one is called positive engagement, basically your story about stress. When a stressful event occurs, do you go into fight or flight? Do you fight or flee from stress? Or do you look at it as a challenge? And I think you've all felt the physical effects when we're in those 2 different spaces, right? We fight or flee, we get foggy, we don't really feel like we're on our game, and then we have all the adrenaline and the cortisol, whereas when we look at a deadline as a challenge, or we look at something going on in our life that a problem we want to fix as a challenge, all of a sudden, it's not that we're not stressed, it's just we feel more alive, and actually research shows our mental agility improves, our cognitive functioning, our memory, our energy levels all spike when we're in that zone. And we found that people who score in that top quartile of positive engagement actually report a 23% drop in stress-related symptoms like headaches, backaches, and fatigue. The only difference in that study, by the way, was their mindset. They were trained to say, oh, stress is coming down the pipeline, I'm going to see it, own it, and use it. And then all of a sudden their symptoms decreased. And this last one is support provision. So we've heard throughout the time we've been here this idea that we're not islands, right? When we help others, that not only is good for them, but it's actually good for us as well. So we've been able to quantify that at work, where we find that people who are incredibly supportive of the people around them, who score in that top quartile, that particular metric, 40% more likely to get a promotion at work over the next year. Scientific proof that what you give is what you get. So when we look at these 3 things together, at work, they predict 75% of your long-term job successes. But there have been other researchers in the field who have been able to see these kinds of elements of our mindset at work in relationships, at work in the educational realm, and how well we learn and how accomplished we are. How do we hire? How do we train? Typically not along these lines, right? So when we can do those positive habits that we've been talking about while we've been here, we actually can improve these measures. We've been able to see that. All three of these elements of our mindset are malleable. And that's why positive psychology, has such an important place, I think, in education and at work as well. So when we start using that as fuel for our broadcast, that's when we start influencing other people in amazing ways. So I'm just going to give you, I want to give you these studies more than anything because it gives you one more language to be able to talk to the people in your life, right? You can talk to them from a spiritual perspective. You can talk to them from a heartfelt perspective. You can talk to them now from a research perspective. And you have that ammo because, we all speak different languages, and that's great. So doctors who are primed to be positive come up with the correct diagnosis 19% faster and more accurately than doctors at neutral. You go in, you make your doctor positive, he's going to come up with a correct diagnosis faster. Great. Managers who start talking to their teams in a different way can actually improve their entire team's level of productivity by 31% in 3 weeks. So this study, the manager just started praising one person, new and different each day, within earshot of other people, and did that for 3 weeks. That's it. So this is a great strategy to try out with your children, or empower, if you're a coach, to empower your client to do at the office. We don't need a managerial position. We don't need that title. Leadership starts at every level of an organization, or no matter what your role is in this world, you can use these as potential options. And sales professionals who are optimistic outsell their pessimistic counterparts by 37%. And how many of you have children here? Yay, me too. He's napping right now, but Sean and I have Leo, the 3-year-old, who is obsessed with trucks. Everything trucks, yeah. So if you have a 4- and 5-year-old at home, you can try this out when you get there. Prime them to be positive, get them to put together a set of blocks. Researchers found that they'll put together the blocks 50% faster than the kids at neutral. So it even impacts spatial memory. We see it across the board. But you all know this, right? So what I'd love to do is talk, for the rest of the time we have together, I'd love to share with you some of the strategies that you can use, or you can empower other people to use, that are communication-based, simple and easy, and we've been able to quantify the results of putting these into practice on a regular basis. So in order to do that, I would love to do an experiment with you. Are you guys up for it? Yes. Okay, all right, this is for fun. And so what I'd love for you to do, first of all, sit up straight. Yeah, mine too. Okay, excellent. Now slump back down for a second. Feels weird, right? Okay, good. So now sit up straight. And so if you've all seen Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, right? She talks about how when you adopt this strong power pose, and actually she has you put your arms up, that it actually changes your chemical structure, lowers your levels of cortisol, raises your levels of testosterone. You're welcome, gentlemen. And it makes you more likable and capable, to appear more likable and capable to people were you to go into an interview situation, for instance, or a meeting. Okay, so now that you all look absolutely gorgeous, what I'd love for you to do is partner up with someone sitting near you. The key, though, with this is to partner up with somebody who's not going to look better than you on television. So if you need to move around, it's okay. All right, so everyone find a partner? You all are like, oh, what? All right, so person number 1 is sitting closest to this side of the room. Raise your hand. Person number 2 sitting closest to this side of the room. Raise your hand. Okay, excellent. And so person number 1, what I'd love for you to do is I'm going to show you a sentence on the screen. And what I'd love for you to do is to say it to person number 2. And when you're done, person number 2, I'd like you to say it back to person number 1. The key with this, though, for both of you, is to say the sentence with feeling and emotion. Are you ready? Okay. Excellent. So, very good. I was listening to the first few rows, and it's so good to see you. So I was looking at the first 3 rows, and you guys did an excellent job. So in broadcasting, you're taught that there's 2 ways to say this sentence. You can either emphasize the main word or the modifier. The main word is good, the modifier is so. Listen to the difference. It's so good to see you versus it's so good to see you. It's a little different, right? Now, I gave this talk in front of 650 people. I do not normally get questions at this point. This young woman in the front row raises her hand, and she's like, wait. I think there's a 3rd way to say the sentence. And I said, oh, well, how would you say it? She said, well, you could emphasize the word you. So I see a lot of you nodding, right? And so I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble picturing it. Can you do it? And she said, sure. It's so good to see you. Okay, you're right. All right, so for the next part, I want you to not wait for your neighbor. I want you to say this tongue twister to keep your mouths nice and loose as fast as you possibly can. Do not wait for the rest of the room. Go. Whoa. Oh, wow. Oh, you're doing it 3 times through. Oh, whoa. Very nice. Okay, well, I know we're in Miami, but this is also PG. Okay, excellent. So, this is the kind of training you would, communication training you would give to people, and you would say, this is going to make you successful, but there is a layer of communication that is so much deeper than that. And so that's what I want to talk to you about right now. There's also an opportunity to just have a little fun. But, okay, so for this first strategy that I want to share, because I want to share with you 3 strategies that we distilled from the research. It's called the power lead, which is where we start off emails, conversations, meetings, phone calls, any interaction you have with other people by saying something positive and meaningful. I know we all intellectually know this, and I'm sure many of you do it many times during the day. The key is, how often are we doing this? How instrumental is this in our broadcast? What are we sharing with other people? Because you know that there are only 2 ways a conversation goes when we start off at negative, right? Either someone says, if they say, hey, how are you? And you start in a negative place, either they offer you compassion, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Or they play misery poker with you. Oh, you think your commute was bad? Let me tell you about my commute. When I was at CBS, I worked overnights for part of the time there, and this was my lead to the conversations. How are you? Oh my God, I'm so tired. Oh, I'm so tired. Do you have a headache like I do? Oh, I feel terrible. I'm so exhausted today. Oh my gosh, okay, stop. I got tired of hearing myself complain. And that's when I started doing some thinking around this, because what ended up always happening was I would start there, and then someone would say, I know, I'm exhausted too. Or they say, oh, do you want me to get you a cup of coffee? Or whatever it was. Meanwhile, when I decided one day that I was going to put into practice this idea of the power lead, the first night, I literally did talk just about a cup of coffee. I was like, even if I talk about coffee, that's what I'm going to say. And so someone came up to me and they said, how are you? I was like, I'm good. I had this cup of coffee. It's really good. I love it. And then the second night, I talked about the weather, because that's always a safe topic. And then by the 3rd night, I don't know what I said, but I think I was getting a little bit better. Oh, by the way, that's where the meaningful part came into play here. So I said something, and my friend said to me, I don't know what this whole happiness thing is you've got going on here, but I like it. And I'm so happy to see you in a good mood, because for a long time now, I've been wanting to tell you my good news. I'm pregnant. Yeah. I was like, yeah, just took me not being a ball of complaints. So anyway, the question is, what's our regular broadcast? And if we don't think those little words mean big, I want you to take a look at this list. Bingo, wrinkle, Florida, wise, gray. What does it make you think of? Yeah, old, yeah, retirement. So, oh, and by the way, no offense to Florida, because Miami is not really, yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So so you guys got it right away, right? But 20-year-old college students didn't pick up on what was going on here. They were split in two groups by researchers. One group was asked to play word games with these words for just 5 minutes. The other group played around with neutral words like dog, cat, house. And then, one by one, they were asked to walk down a long hallway to where part 2 of the experiment was going to continue. The thing is, researchers love deception, and so part 2 of the experiment was actually in the hallway. These students were being videotaped, and the ones that played around with subtle crimes of age for 5 minutes were caught on camera actually walking slightly slower and more hunched over. Okay, so we don't want to prime our friends for walkers, but if you talk about the word together in instructions for a project, it actually fuels people to work longer and feel higher levels of energy after. These little words make a huge difference. And I think it's mostly about, and so we've talked a lot about during the last 2 days about this idea of keeping top of mind this constant choice that we have, right? There was one person that solidified it for me, and really I was so grateful to her for sharing her story because again, it changed my perspective. So we did a lot of work, Sean mentioned it earlier today a little bit, but with Walmart, and I did a 3-city tour where we were trying to pilot our program, this positivity program that we were running with them, to get feedback and ideas from the associates. And so I come in, I'm like, hello, I'm a happiness researcher, which you never know how that's going to go over. And they were all so gracious and kind. And then this one associate came up to me afterwards, and she said, my name's Sharon, and I am the happiest woman in the world. I was like, okay, this is going to be good. Tell me why. She said that what happened was, so she waited until a bit later in life to marry because she hadn't met anyone special until she meets this awesome guy, right? They get married, she's blissfully content. And then a few months into their relationship, her mother, whom she was very close with, died suddenly of health complications. So obviously she was very sad. Her husband sticks by her through the mourning process, and just as she's starting to feel just a little bit better, he was killed in a car accident. Yeah, and so my face, like I can't hide anything, right? And I'm like, can you tell me why? So I don't understand. There's a disconnect here. Tell me what happened. Why are you calling yourself the happiest woman in the world? And she said, I'm the happiest woman in the world because after I mourned his death and got to a place where I felt as if I could make a choice towards happiness, I decided that every morning when I wake up, I've got this choice. I can either show up and be miserable and inflict myself on everyone around me, or I can make the choice to be that bright light, even though some days it's still hard. And you know what? I talked to her colleagues, and they were like, oh yeah, Sharon, she's the one that comes in is like high-fiving people. She's amazing. She's so positive. If you've got a problem, you can go to her. She tries to help you solve it. She's such an inspiration because they know her story, right? So if she can make that decision and she can choose happiness, my problem today, well, doesn't seem as such a big deal. And you know what her power lead is? Hey, it's a great day. How are you doing? She doesn't even let you get in there and mess things up, right? She's like, nope, I'm setting the script. Okay, so I encourage you in any way that you possibly can, in any moment. Sometimes it's just doing one more power lead a day, right? Pick up that phone call, tell something positive. So today mine would have been, so yesterday, if you asked me what my power lead, or like, hey, how are you? I'd been like, oh, I'm great. I had breakfast with my son this morning. He's being so cute. Today, if you ask me, I'd be like, oh, I'm great. I have breakfast quietly by myself. Right? But so share the best because it prompts others to match in kind. You take the lead on the conversation, and I think that's how you transform other people and offer them an opportunity to be their best selves as well. Okay, so for this next one, I'd love for you to watch this video. It's called the Color Changing Card Trick, and I want you to see if you can figure out what's going on here.
Changing card trick with this blue-backed deck of cards. Now the idea is very simple. I'm just going to spread the cards in front of Sarah and ask her to push any card towards the camera.
Right, okay, let's see. I'm going to go for this card here.
Okay. Now Sarah could have selected any card at all from the deck, but she selected the card which is now face down on the table. And what I'm going to ask her to do is show us which card she selected.
Right, so the card that I chose was in fact the 3 of diamonds.
The 3 of diamonds, okay, excellent choice. That card goes back into the deck. Now I'm just going to spread the cards face up on the table, give a little click of the fingers, and you'll see that Sarah's card here has now got a blue back. Not particularly surprising. What's slightly more surprising is all of the other cards have got red backs. And that is the amazing color-changing card trick.
Did you guys see it? Did you see it? Oh, I love this. Okay, so watch this.
Hi, I'm Richard, this is Sarah, and we're going to perform the amazing colour-changing card trick with this blue-backed deck of cards. Now the idea is very simple. I'm just going to spread the cards in front of Sarah and ask her to push any card towards the camera.
Right, okay, let's see. I'm going to go for this card here.
Okay. Now Sarah could have selected any card at all from the deck, but she selected the card which is now face down on the table. And what I'm going to ask her to do is show us which card she selected.
Right, so the card that I chose was in fact the 3 of diamonds.
The 3 of diamonds, okay, excellent choice. That card goes back into the deck. Now I'm just going to spread the cards face up on the table, give a little click of the fingers, and you'll see that Sarah's card here has now got a blue back. Not particularly surprising. What's slightly more surprising is all of the other cards have got red backs. And that is the amazing colour-changing card trick.
I love those videos. Richard Wiseman's phenomenal and has done a lot of research on luck, and so anyway, he's awesome. So what I love about those videos, it's set on the screen, the color-changing card trick. I told you to watch as the cards change color, right? So what are we looking for to happen? The cards, right, to change color, and yet there was so much more going on there. This is a brilliant reminder that sometimes we can be so focused on one part of our reality that we miss all the other colors changing simultaneously. Our brains are incredible processors. We can process 40 to 50 bits of information every single second of the day. The challenge is that from all of our nerve endings, we're bombarded by more than 11 million bits of information. And so what that means is inherently there are choices. If we first see all the problems and negatives and hassles and complaints, we literally are not leaving our brain resources left over to focus on all the good stuff, the stuff that propels us, the stuff that keeps us going, the gratitudes and the positive experiences. It's not to say one is stronger than the other or more valuable than the other. They hold both important places. The problem is our brain is so good at the negative stuff sometimes, right? We get stuck there. So how do we kick ourselves out? So I'm going to talk about this in the first person, but you can also use this in, and if you're a coach, you're probably already using this, but you can use this in your practice. You can use this with your 15-year-old. The next strategy that we'll talk about is called fact-checking, which is where you fact-check a story. If you are feeling stressed, if you are feeling negative, you've got to ask yourself, is this story working for me? Is it working for me? No. Right? So let's fact check it and let's try to find other facts. So the first 2 steps of this are so easy usually. Isolate the negative or stressful thought, try to get it down to 1 sentence, and then list a set of facts that prove that you are right. You probably have them at the ready. The third step is sort of the stretch, right? So it's where you isolate or you get your brain to focus on a new set of facts. I call them fueling facts. You're not trying to fight against that original story. You're just trying to see another set of facts that ultimately illuminate a new story. And so I'll give you a really simple example. This is, I think, something we've experienced in school. We experience this maybe at work now. I'm never going to finish this project in time. Well, I am never going to finish this project in time. Of course not, because I've got a heavy workload. My colleagues are swamped. Who's going to help me? I've got my son's recital later this week, and I am exhausted. I am never going to finish this project in time. Makes sense. But how else could we see this situation? What strengths do we have? Skills, resources, connections that we can reach out to? What's the other side of the story? Well, okay, if I were to be fair, I've been at this company for 4 years, and I've actually never needed a deadline extension before. And those 3 people are swamped at work, but I've got these other 2 guys that might be able to help me just at least a little bit. Oh wait, you know what? I handed in a similar proposal last week. I've got the template on my computer. I could probably use that as a jumping off point. I got good feedback on that one, so I know I'm doing something right. You know what? If I add up the number of hours between 9 and 6, between now and the deadline, I've got more than 20 hours I could devote to this project. Right? Equally true facts. I'll tell you what story fuels me better. So it's about getting our brain to focus on those facts. That's a totally different story, and the outcome has to be different after focusing on it. When Sean and I met, it was a little bit before, and as any woman who's tried to get pregnant or had kids, you know what I'm talking about. It was a little bit before doomsday, which is age 35. And so as we talked about having our, trying to get pregnant with our first child, we were like, okay, well, I'm reading all these really scary statistics about likelihood of getting pregnant. And the one I saw everywhere, which was women ages 35 to 39, after 1 year of trying, 30% of them will not be pregnant. Okay, that's kind of depressing. So I decided to fact check this story because it wasn't really working for me, right? And here's what I found. When you look up that statistic, it originally appeared in the journal Reproduction, and that's why media has grabbed onto it and it's everywhere. But when you actually go to the original reference, it's based on a study that was conducted on French birth records from the years 1670 to 1830. It's time before antibiotics and IVF and anything like our normal life. And when you actually look for more recent studies, they are significantly more hopeful. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to be focusing on. And if we are still in that percentage that's not getting pregnant, what we can do about it. That's an optimistic position. And so this last strategy, we've talked about it, so I'm not going to spend more than a second on it, but I really hope you do it. Send a positive email, and then, you know what the coolest thing is? I'm just going to give you one iteration on it, because this was one of the best things I've ever done. When I was in that master's program at Penn in positive psychology, it's experiential, you do it along with everybody. And so 3 of my classmates and I got on an email chain, and we started sending our gratitudes to one another each day. And it was awesome for 2 reasons. One, I got to know them so well in such a short period of time because I got to see what excited them in life, what made them happy, what they were grateful for. And the other thing is that I'm really good for the first 3 days of these positive habits, and then I fall off the wagon a lot of times, right? But if you've got other people emailing you, it's a wonderful reminder. So at 11:59 sometimes I was typing up my gratitudes for the day, and I'm so grateful to them for having sent me theirs. So anyway, I hope you engage in it, and I'm excited to hear about your results. So if you would like more information, I've made this so easy. You just got to send a blank email to start@broadcastinghappiness.com. And it's an autoresponder that comes back to you with all kinds of additional resources, the key takeaways from today, a success scale that tests for those 3 greatest predictors of long-term success that we talked about. You can use it in your coaching practice. We make it freely available. So I hope you'll take advantage of it. So it's start@broadcastinghappiness.com. And then I just want to share with you one last story, because all good journalists are supposed to wrap the story back around and put a nice bow on it. So when I got to Englewood, that neighborhood that I told you about with the shooting, I was overwhelmed. I was daunted by what could possibly be done there to improve the situation. Roshana Baldwin, who grew up there, she said, we're going to change the story here, and we're going to change results. So she was an intern with me when I was at CBS. We'd go out in the news van together, and I adore her, but mostly I'm so excited for her for the work that she's doing in Englewood. She started something called Good in Englewood. She has a hashtag, and it's a media campaign. She tells all the good stories that are coming out of that neighborhood. Kids who've graduated from high school and gotten Gates Millennium Scholarships, gun buyback programs that are working, urban farm programs that are working. She told so many good stories and became a magnet for even more of them that, get this, after a relatively short period of time, and after banding together with a handful of other community activists, they were able to secure a $20 million grant for a revitalization project there. Awesome. Change your story, change your power. And so, while I would love the news media as a whole, especially right now, to make a great shift in how they're covering the news, to not just talk about all the bad stuff, but talk about what we can do about it, to share those inspiring stories with us. And there are some bright lights out there, but until the news media as a whole makes a great shift, we as individuals need not wait. We can make the shift today. We can broadcast the good things. We can talk about successes, not in one-off situation, but repeated over and over and over, because that is the fuel. That is the good stuff that helps tip our world away from stress and negativity to a world in which we believe our behavior matters and we can create the positive change we're looking for. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're awesome. Thank you.